Public meeting will please run the pledge of allegiance.
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice.
Very much to the Ranchester regular town council meeting, February 2024. We do have a quorum and approval of the current agenda.
I would so move.
Moved by Jefferson, by Tracy, to approve the agenda as published. Any comments? All in favor?
Aye.
There's approval of minutes for the January 2nd, 2024 meeting.
I would so move.
By Jefferson, by Tracy, to approve the minutes. No discussion. Hearing none, all in favor? Aye.
Aye.
If there, so you want to have any comments from the public or guests, or we probably all here for a specific reason, because we got a lot on the agenda. Offer anything, anybody. Okay. I'm sure you'll have opportunities on it.
The subdivision is like a little.
Yeah, well, that's covered, it's separate from us, so it's
Okay.
it's next one down, so. Okay, now we're gonna have public hearing on the annexation of 23.87 acres into the town of Ranchester. It's been notified, everybody out there, and we will take comments on that, and we'll open the public hearing at 6:01. So if you have a comment, please come up here and speak. Identify yourself and you speak into the microphone, that's your count, so everybody can hear you. So anybody have any comments?
Just wanted more information on it.
Well, they come up here and come up and ask for the. Do you have comments, like say, what's happening?
We came to get more information on this annexation, the subdivision and the plan.
Okay, that's a comment.
All right, okay.
That's a comment. So, yeah, come on.
That's because I don't know what is annexation required.
Why is it required?
Yeah.
If you, in order to be part of the town itself, in the corporate limits and have goods and services and to be a part of town, you have to annex. Or the standard, or all of you in the county. So it's either the county or the town.
Right. So it's to get public utilities.
And at some point, once it's just developed, if they look at the plat and everything, the town would take responsibility for the streets and infrastructure once it's just developed.
Thank you.
Any other questions? I do have a couple. Oh, sorry. Thank you.
Okay, I live right next to adjacent to the new property we're speaking about. Okay, there's a wetland there. I wondered how they were going to protect that. We actually blocked our residence just because, you know, there isn't going to be anything built back there because of the swamp. We've lived there for 39 years. I built the house, and when I excavated the footings, on one side I went 7 inches down, and the other side I went like 10 inches down. I got soil in to bring the property up, and my basement has still flooded. We have a sump pump to take care of that problem. And if you know where I live next to where the old dinosaur museum is. So I am way above the swamp. And we have seen that whole flat land below us flood. Maybe not water clear to Ranchester, but close. anyway, just to let people know what I have seen in 39 years.
Yeah, and that's why we're having a public hearing.
Yes.
So,
Okay.
we don't know what's being developed there.
Right.
It would be annexed in as 300 feet of V1 of the front along the highway, and then R3 residential
Yeah.
in the backside. That's all I know. So,
Just so people
and I
understand.
right, and is there anybody from the developer, anybody that has any comments on that part of it?
Mr. Mayor, members of the public, my name is Marcus DeFore. I'm an engineer for WC Engineering. Representing the client, I'm putting together this plat that you see up here on the screen. So some of the issues that I've heard are flooding, and I've also heard of the type of land use, the type of structures that could be built on it. Kind of what I want to call out, I want to address the wetland comment first. So you see where it says parcel A, 23.83 acres there. And then there's kind of a jogging line that kind of goes, just below that there with lots of different, points. So where that line was drawn, dividing parcel A from what's the lower half, parcel B, that line was traced along what's out there now are cattails. And cattails are a plant that likes to grow in kind of swampy conditions. They're natural wetlands are kind of known for is having these characteristic cattail plants growing out. So what we did is when we divided this property into parcels A and B, is we minded where those cattails were because we knew that anything south of that that kind of jogged line, anything south of that was going to be wetland, potential flooding, things of that nature. So in kind of dividing this parcel A, just those 23.87 acres to the north there, that was done purposely to avoid both wetlands, but also to avoid swampy conditions, and also try to keep whatever development's going to be going in outside of like I said, wetlands or flood prone areas. So I hope that clarifies any questions as far as, how are the wetlands can be protected there. Yes.
So above the dotted line, that is where the wetland, right?
Just to be clear, it's this line right there through the middle there is the one that is kind of following cattails. And the notification letter that was sent out to residents adjacent to the property. It showed a map with a colored imagery. Yep, and if you can see there where there's a red dashed line for property line or development limit, you can see those cattails where we've purposely gone around those.
So is the intent here to leave parcel A as it is?
The intent is to just basically split this property into parcels A and B. What we are hoping to annex tonight's meeting is just parcel A. And so that would consist of B1 district business along that US Highway 14, which is the straight line at the top. So B1 district would be the first 300 feet setback from Highway 14 for businesses. And then kind of the remaining acres, which is kind of on the southern half of that parcel A, that would be for R3 district.
That's the wettest portion of that entire property.
Yep. By
far, and it's not even close. I mean, the wildlife that's in there and vegetation, someone with a wildlife background is consistent with the wetlands. So I don't really understand how that's going to.
The river flows.
It floods. It floods beyond where you have the cattail.
Yeah.
It's wet right now.
There's cattails all the way up to the highway.
That's true.
Where he's talking about his house is 20 feet higher than what that parcel is at least one.
Yes,
Uh-huh.
I mean,
At least 20 feet.
I mean,
How is that ever going to be stable enough to put a building?
Go ahead.
Can you explain that R3 can be up to a 45-foot house? I mean, apartment buildings that are 5 feet apart from each other? I mean, it could end up being hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of, problems.
Some of those things, because since we haven't seen any kind of design or anything, what's going into those properties, that's something that we dealt with, with the planning and review of the planning and zoning commission. So it's just a blank slate right now.
But
That is possible,
But R3 allows that, they allow rooming houses, you know.
yes. Yes, and but
It's-
those are issues that we will address when we actually get to something that's planned. I mean, it's developed, we don't know what it is. I have anything to do with that. That's just what their request was to bring me with that.
I understand that there'll be low income housing put in. There is an environmental impact report required for any have assisted low income housing. Has that been handled?
We haven't heard anything about, we don't know what's on that. No, there's no plat to it. So there's no design. So we don't know what kind of housing is. That, you know, if that comes in, that would be something else, but that's way down the road. We're just looking at whether or not this property would be annexed into the town.
So what you're saying is someone has purchased the property for future possibilities of growing there and
We have it's the same issue with across the street, across the highway there, where the new elementary school is. There's 40 acres were annexed in there. They did the school first and then the other property as well. And we have done this in Ranchester before where the property is, actually, this is the second and third annexation in the last 40 years or something like that. But that was, once they get a design in there, then they bring it to the planning and zoning commission and say, well, this is what we want to do. Just
Okay, the high-rise apartments that were recently built, and the way I understood it, they were gonna be sold as individual or houses. And now they're,
the ones by us, the trail.
yes, there's two different ones facing each other.
Well, Trails West.
Okay,
Trails
and
West.
now they're just rentals.
It's still,
Fridays.
there's still individual properties with descriptions that if people, there's been some individual, there's been somebody's bought 2 or 3 of them maybe. I don't know, those are individually owned.
The way it was brought up before, that they were gonna be sold as housing.
And that's what,
And instead of apartment,
let's get back on the topic.
well, I don't want this to happen somewhere else.
So when they put those in as condominiums, and that's a PUD, which is what it was back in those days.
We can just change things whenever we want.
They didn't, that's not, they're not sold as unit, they're individual units. They each have their individual titles and property in those properties. So if somebody wanted to come in and buy them up and then rent them out as individual houses, that would be that. But that's something we have to look out in the long term when they do kind of develop on that. And I don't know of any right now.
So what would the cost to the town of Ranchester for providing infrastructure?
We don't pay for the infrastructure development.
Utility development, aren't going to be responsible?
We will take over responsibility for the utilities, water and sewer and streets.
There's
Once
gonna
it's
be
built by the developer.
Okay, there's gotta be some cost associated with that.
Not directly to the town, but there is a cost in the long term, but we get the property, we get the property taxes from it.
So it's not gonna raise our.
No,
If it ends up being low income housing and government paid, I don't think it'll be any property taxes, or maybe government paid.
I do not know what's going on. That may be something that comes up during the planning and the development of the property.
But I think if they're annexing for R3, they're not planning on putting homes, individual homes down there.
You could,
Then they could do it for R1.
Yeah.
It probably wouldn't be as much.
I just know what they asked for.
This is more of a comment really than anything. My personal opinion is that in respects to how they're proposing to zone it and also annex it in, given the state of the land, I would ask that you guys vote no on that,
On the,
on the
On the
annexation.
so I'm part of the, just some background knowledge. Part of the zoning, 300 feet of B1 in the front is required by our ordinance. The rest of it, we could, most up until, traditionally, we've always just annexed in property as R1, for single family dwellings. That never restricts exactly what you have, so I don't know what the business plan, I don't know what the future is for this property. So I just, let's just let you know.
Yeah, and I guess just more from my perspective, just given the state of the land and the wetland that it is, I don't see much of a point in annexing it if it's, a designated wetland. I mean, it's an NWI, it's a wetland. So I'm just getting my.
I'm not, that I'll leave that up to the developer and the, when you actually get to the annexation ordinance, you still have 3 readings on this. So there's still things to do.
Can you explain to everybody kind of how it works? Like, this is the public hearing of so you guys can ask questions and everything. There's still a meeting for this annexation on the next planning commission meeting. There will be a meeting for on the next council meeting, the one after that, the one after that. This is for information, right? So, I mean, it's not like you can't find out something tomorrow or call and ask questions or call and find out. I mean, I'm glad everybody's here asking questions about what's going on there, but as far as, well, what's going to be built there, we don't know. I mean, they're requesting to annex in a piece of 23.87 acres of ag property right now. That's what we know now. Not saying that might not change in a month when they come to the planning commission and say, well, right now there's not a vote happening or anything like that. It's just kind of information, and we don't know everything right now.
Well,
So-
that's the point. I mean, the town should have the right to ask them what their plans are.
We don't.
If they're requesting annexation,
They would not take into static on request. We have not seen any plans for it. You're just annexing it. It may sit there for 20 years.
They're asking to annex a piece of property at this point.
We don't have, okay, this goes back to the planning and zoning commission and looking at our ordinances. You can, will allow annexation, but they have to have a plan before they annex. We do not have that on our books right now. So we just can't ask that question. We can ask and we can say, well, we might do this, we might do that, but we have no way of having them come up with a plat first and everything, what their plans are in the long term. We do not have that authority. We could do that if you so choose. We can go through, come to the planning and zoning commission, planning meetings, and say, this is what we want. That's an ordinance. This is an ordinance. In the past, we didn't need that ordinance. We had 40 acres when I moved here that was never developed. We was annexed into the town at some point. It was just left vacant. So we don't have that authority to ask a private developer what their long-term plans are at this point. It could be put in the ordinances at some point.
and who would do that?
The people, if you request it, we have to go through a rating, we have to write it up, and do a regular ordinance. It takes at least 3 years. So now we go into our zoning, look at our zoning ordinances. You can see what rules we follow under for that. A lot of the annexations of how things are annexed into towns are dictated to us by state statute. So it's not necessarily all in our hands. So those are.
What are the advantages to the city and to the citizens in annexing this property?
We have more room for development and more actually business land. So we could have
More control? Would that be fair to
yes,
say?
that we don't have any control outside the town, outside the city. We can be more restrictive. So if somebody say if they wanted to, other could say, it's going to be just leave that in, and somebody else went to the county and wanted to annex it through the county rules. We don't have veto power on that. We have input, not necessarily veto power.
What about our septic system? Can our septic system take all this?
We don't have septic system. We have a sanitary sewer system, yes. We
And can it handle what?
Yeah, we can't add anything to our town that does not, we can't support the infrastructure to it.
Are there studies that
And
can
so
be
we
seen
look at-
that if they build, what, 15 acres is whatever the front, 300 feet, the balance of that, I think is 16, 17 acres of, if it is R3 and it's built like the other R3 that's right across from Family Dollar, they can be 5 feet apart from each other, 4 stories tall. And then if they build up 20 feet above that to build, I mean, anybody that's living there now wouldn't have a mountain view. Your view would be, in, you know,
That's a
and
responsibility.
we have some of the problems. There was drug dealing going on over there. I've heard of, I mean, it's just, it's frightening, you know, to have that and not have any idea what they're planning. Because the guy that's planning this, he didn't even have an LLC until end of June of last year. No business history, no nothing history when you go on the internet. That's kind of scary.
Okay,
Okay.
I recognize your comments.
Okay.
I'm not gonna, any more comments, something? Yes, sir.
Mr. Mayor, Rick Golden with Grand Tech Corporation. Does this include any part of Kapuchka Lane?
No,
Would it be of best interest if this happens? So you have an access point
that would have to be, I don't know what the design.
besides the state highway, if they would not allow it. It would be in best interest to consider that, just a comment.
Yeah, we can look at that with the Kapuchka Lane, it's a private easement. So
Well, I think that's hard to determine who.
yeah, I don't, that would be
The
something.
county claims that they own that land. When it was deeded over to us, we quick deeded it.
Yeah, I tried to look up the history on that. It was a lot of,
I think the consultants are probably running into the same thing, but
that's something
for access to that property other than the state highway, which may or may
Okay.
not be allowed.
okay, I do have a comment on that too. Thank you very much. Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, Gene Cox from the Timber Drive,
Mhm.
which is on the other side of
Right,
the
right.
Kapuchka Lane. We have lived here for 12 years. We built our home
Mhm.
and we have seen that area flood over and over and over again. And when people go to start filling that in, they're gonna put junk in there, literally, whatever they can fill to bring it up. That water's got to go somewhere. It's gonna go to Rantec, or it's gonna come to our slough over at Timber Drive, or back to that field back there, or to this gentleman's house here. And that has to be your main issue, because that area is always wet, always floods, and always causes problem. And if you go starting to fill that in with junk, to raise that up, to make it feasible to grow something on there, then I highly recommend that we do not annex that.
Okay, so
Yeah, you
anyway,
move the river, and the river has its own idea.
Exactly.
I'll leave that. I have to leave that to the engineers. I'm saying just taking comments right now.
That's just common
Yeah.
sense. That's not engineering. That is common sense. When you fill up a wetland, the water's got to go somewhere.
You have to have the plan.
And it's going to do damage somewhere, because that water's not just gonna all of a sudden go away.
And I've seen it. I've been here 30 years.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm gonna cut off I got a couple things that we're gonna read into the record. Comments, one is from the Wyoming Department of Transportation. I would like to provide a comment from the Wyoming Department of Transportation in regards to the AJA2 annexation that is scheduled to be heard before the Ranchester Town Council on February 6, 2024. The proposed annexation is located adjacent to US Highway 14, US Highway 14, and YDOT right away along the south side of the roadway. There are currently no approaches on this property via US 14. In future development desires access to US 14, the landowner will need to contact YDOT to get proper permits and place them into requirements of the YDOT access manual. Additionally, please be reminded that for cities and towns under 1,500 population, YDOT will not be responsible for cleaning litter between the curb line and property line or maintaining sidewalks, curbs, and gutter. This is stated in YDOT operating policy 40-2. The proposed annexation will increase the limits in which the town will be responsible for these duties. So this is signed with Michelle and Edwards, YDOT District 4 traffic engineer. And I have no one that was given to us. Hello, unfortunately, I cannot be at tonight's meeting, but I would like to share my concerns and thoughts based on my experience residing for the last 8 years at 4th Avenue in Western Ranchester. I'm against the annexation due to flooding. I see it every year on that land. Even during a low moisture year, the property is covered in water for several weeks. The floodwater would need to be redirected towards potential residential areas. Currently, a house that has been built next to my property had to haul so much fill dirt that now water is directed right onto my property. Apparently, permits were purchased for this new building, but Ranchester has no process to check or enforce the building codes. In my opinion, this is a disaster waiting to happen. I was told I could hire a lawyer and engineer to check if the codes were followed, but that does not seem right. That's not the city's and Ranchester's responsibility. I'm not interested in having my property flooded in even more. Changing the flow of wyoming waters is something that needs to be approved by a wide core of engineers. Also, reclassifying floodplains is not something a client hired engineering firm should have the authority to do. This property is also full of native plants, tadpoles, and wildlife. Migrating birds also use the land. There is also historical value to this property. That is the exact location of where the logs were harvested from the typhoon and the big farms and the site of the mill. My views and concerns are shared by several Ranchester residents. I'm definitely not against growth, but this annexation will lead to bigger problems all around. Please share this letter with community members. Thank you. It's signed Andy Ireland. So at this point, I'm going to just go ahead and I think we've had enough comments. And so one more chance, but I'd like to close this public hearing at 6:27. So that's it for a public hearing. We'll go through planning and zoning, and which is also will take comments, and then we'll like to, based on the recommendations, and ordinance process, which is what we have to do. We have to have 3 readings on it.
You have to have what?
3 readings of an ordinance. Okay, so moving right along. We're moving into our public hearings for renewal liquor licenses. And since we have three types of liquor licenses, I'll cluster those together. So the retail, microbrewery, and bar and grill license, I'll do each one of those as a separate public hearing. So for open the public hearing for the retail liquor licenses at 6:28, and these are for Paul Dodge doing business as a Silver Spur Bar and Lounge, 408 US Highway 14, Three Bells LLC doing business as Buckhorn Travel Plaza, 723 US Highway 14, and TFG LLC doing business as the Common Buckshot Saloon, 719 US Highway 14. Are there any comments or concerns about the liquor licenses? Any comments? Okay. We'll close the public hearing for the retail liquor license at 6:19 or 6:29. And open it at 6:30 for the microbrewery permit. River Brewing LLC doing business with River Brewing Company. 530 US Highway 14, Ranchester. Any comments about the microbrewery. Okay, I'll close it at, let's say, 6. Okay, now, at 6:30 here, I'll open up the bar and grill license. Public hearing, this is for Turner Brewing Company, doing business as Turner Brewing Company. 5:30, that's why 14 for the bar and grill license. Any comments? Going down, I'll close the public hearing for the bar and grill licenses. So. So, the public hearing on that, that's, old business, we don't have any old business, now we have. Under new business, the renewal of the liquor licenses, that we just had a public hearing for. So, okay. You wanna do by the. I'll entertain a motion to approve the retail liquor license.
Mr. Mayor, I would so move.
Moved by Jeff, second by Tracy, to approve the renewal of retail liquor licenses. Any comments? Any comments? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Renewal of the microbrewery permit.
Mr. Mayor, I would move to approve the microbrewery permit.
Moved by Jeff, second by Tracy, to approve the microbrewery permit. Any more discussion? Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Approval of the bar and grill liquor license.
Mr. Mayor, I would move to approve the bar and grill liquor license for Brewing LLC.
Been moved and seconded to approve the bar and grill license. And any more comments? Any comments? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you very much. So under number 4, we have a resolution. For the town was applying for economic development grant from the Wyoming Business Council for $100,000. Or grants for 75,000 and with a match of 25,000. So the resolution number 01/2024, a resolution authorizing submission of an application to the Wyoming Business Council under the Business Ready Community Grant and loan program for the planning project on behalf of the governing body of the town of Ranchester for the purpose of Ranchester Economic Development Plan Grant in the amount of 75,000. So,
Mr. Mayor, just a question, that this is a grant and not a loan, correct?
right. For the match.
For the match of 25,000 in the town.
And we had a public hearing on this, and we do have the minutes from the public
Yeah,
hearing.
we did have a public hearing on this on January 30th.
Mr. Mayor, I would move to approve resolution 01/2024 for the submission of a Wyoming Business Council grant.
We moved and seconded to approve the resolution for the business council grant. Any comments? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Carries. Request the purchase of a 2018 Ram 3500. We are in need of another vehicle for the town crew. We just don't have enough yet. They're being covered now, so. You want to have anything to say about this?
You have any questions?
Okay. We did look at it, we did have our on-site mechanic, Jim, let's look at this. It has a low mileage. It's got a toolbox on it and everything else. Something we've been talking about, because we now have a Parks and Recs department. We just have a need for good use, to make sure it's a good use truck that is available to us.
Mr. Mayor, Tim, what is your recommendation after having looked at the truck? Oh, like I said, I talked to Scott quite a bit. Everything he said was spot on. The only thing I couldn't find wrong with that truck is right front tire was low. So, and we're running into issues because, like I said, we hire summer help. They get spread out all over town. We're thin on vehicles as it is. I know there's talk of maybe hiring somebody else for the parks department, which puts us even farther down, so.
Your recommendation would be to purchase this
Yes.
vehicle? Mr. Mayor, in light of the recommendation from staff, I would move to approve the purchase of the 2018 Ram 3500.
Been moved and seconded to move the purchase of 2018 Ram 3500. This was, you know, it's $40,000. We mentioned that, that's what their amount is. So
I did book it out. It books for 40 without utility bed. So.
did you say? Move and seconded to approve the purchase. Any more discussion? Okay.
Aye.
Okay, number 6, final acceptance, Stony Bridge Phase 3. So. We may have a comment.
Been working through Stoner's Street. I think you guys have been watching the progress out there. And there's been a few delays with the subdivision due to the wet year this last year, but we've reached a point now where we feel like we've met all of the punch list items that the engineer has put together. There's a few outstanding items that have been put on for when frost comes out of the ground. And we put together a letter to the town committing to finishing those projects by June 1st. And we provided a $25,000 bond for the completion of those projects. If you have any other questions or comments?
Will, do you have any comments on the letter?
No, I don't.
You're satisfied with it?
Yeah, there's a couple items that we have some drainage to pick up and to take care of, but if it's done before June 1st, it's not something that's gonna affect somebody building a house out there or wanting to build a house. Things to do with the detention pond, things of that nature, getting some sidewalks put in that we were talking about on the south side of the project, so I'm comfortable with everything.
Okay. Any questions?
Mr. Mayor, Mr. Ranger, I do appreciate the commitment in the letter. That's very forthright. Trying to move this forward. Curious, do they get power out there?
MDU has been setting a lot of transformers. I don't know that they have been energized yet, but they had a third-party contractor setting transformers for them. Okay. There's, I know there's a couple temporaries that were put in place, but I haven't seen meters in those temporaries yet. So I would assume that is not completed. But it's all paid for, and we're just kind of at the mercy of MDU to finish their work.
I suspect you're not the only one. Mr. Mayor, I would move to approve final acceptance, Stone Ridge Phase 3.
Moved by Jeff, second by Tracy to accept final acceptance of Stone Ridge Phase 3. Any more comments? Any more comments? All in favor? Aye. Okay, results of the water study. Well, this is the Zoom meeting.
Mr. Mayor, if I might, as much as people like enjoying watching paint dry, if you don't want to watch
You don't want to stay
the rest
the rest
of our
of this.
minutia and sausage making, you're welcome to either depart or you're welcome to stay.
We
and watch if you like.
won't be insulted. If you find out.
So, you know, get comfortable when we're doing stuff you may want to leave. And I appreciate everybody's comments.
If you want to know about your water rates going up, you might want to listen.
Okay,
Carl, can you hear us?
I can hear you. I need to have you turn on screen sharing for me. I'll tell you what, while you're working on that, I'll go ahead and do introductory things. Hi, everybody. I'm Carl Brown. I'm the president of GettingGreatRates.com. I'm a utility rate analyst. I've been analyzing rates since 2005 as a consultant. I actually did some things which were large parts of rate analysis for a little bit more than 10 years before that, when I worked for the Missouri Department of Natural Resources, basically the water and sewer and other kinds of things permitting agency. So I kind of cut my teeth there. I left there in 2005 to consult privately. I've done 368 analyses as of one of the days last week. You all have a couple, so we'll try to wrap up another one or two here pretty soon. So that's a little bit of an intro of what I do and how I come at rate analysis. I start with cost of service analysis, and then if the client doesn't want to stay exactly to cost of service, they tell me how they would like me to tailor the rates to their situation. So then I model rates in some other variation of cost of service. I try to keep folks very, very close to cost of service because in my world, cost of service, which just simply means if somebody, a customer, causes the utility to incur a cost, then that person should reimburse the utility for that cost. That's the basic notion behind cost of service rates. You have to do a lot of math to arrive at it, but as I talk this evening, just keep in mind the rates that I aimed you all at are based on cost of service principles. Now you can develop rates in different structures and arrive at cost of service, and the different structures can still be considered cost of service. They're just different because maybe the minimum charge is flat or the minimum charge is based on meter size, or there are different criteria that you can use for setting different parts of rates. One other thing that I'll tell you about to get started is Ranchester is small. You only have a few hundred water and sewer connections. When you have very few connections and you don't have very many that are different, that are larger than a regular residential size meter, it doesn't make a whole lot of practical sense to go to a meter size based rate. Whereas once you have 1,000, 2,000, definitely 3,000 connections, you usually end up with enough oversized meters to make meter size based rates make sense. So in your case, right now in water, a little less so in sewer, you have rates that are actually more complicated than what they need to be. You can actually go to a level minimum charge for water in town, a level but slightly higher minimum charge for out of town. And if I remember right, you sell some bulk water, a different kind of rate for bulk water, and that's it. You got those three kinds of structures. On the wastewater side, your rate structure is already basically that. So on the wastewater side, you're already in the right ballpark for structure complexity or simplicity, really. On the water side, you actually can stand to simplify some more. I usually see it go the other way, but then I often work with 1,000, 2,000 connection systems. So they're in the ballpark where they do need to be moving up to meter size based rates. You still should, though, assess new connection fees I call those system development fees based on meter size. And the fee should graduate, get higher as meter size goes up. Because, back to the cost of service notion, bigger meters can pass more flow at peak demand. That means your system has to have more capacity to be able to serve them. Capacity costs money. So you should assess fees that recover capacity costs in proportion to how much peak flow different meter sizes can demand. So on the connection fee side, yes, assess meter size based rates. On the user charge fee side, everybody's regular user charge rates have a flat minimum charge, no usage allowance. Right now you have 2,000 gallons. No usage allowance. That kind of messes up the cost of service notion because it costs the utility money to produce that first 2,000 gallons. So you should be getting paid for it, not giving it away. And then a unit charge that in your case, it's in a conservation rate structure. It goes up as use goes up to try to encourage folks to not use quite so much. Now, in the public hearing on the annexation of a piece of property at the very first of the meeting, that property is eventually going to need sewer service, water service too. And as I recall, right now you're in a moratorium for new connections of sewer customers. And somebody nod yes if I got that right.
That's not correct.
That means, that means you can't hook up new sewer customers until you build capacity, fix the problems in the sewer system.
Carl, that's not the case.
Oh, that's not the case?
No, no.
Okay, it's not a moratorium issue, it's just simply a capacity and a need issue. I understand that you probably will need some capital improvements on the wastewater side, much more than what you need on the water side. That's some basics. Now, I don't want to spend a lot of time going over the details. The rate analyst in me, I could talk all night until about 5 o'clock tomorrow morning about the details. You guys don't care about that. What you need to know is the rates that I calculated are based on cost of service with very slight variations to fit your situation. I'm going to share a different screen for you so that you can see what I'm talking about. Now, do you all see water and sewer rate analysis report, Ranchester, Wyoming?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, I'm going to take you through just a few pages of this report. The report is an even 100, actually it's 98 pages long with a 2-page letter on the front, but it's 100 pages in this thing. Yours is actually pretty simple. Some of these run a little bit long, 200, 250 pages. Yours is pretty simple because your rate system is, your rate structure needs are pretty simple. You don't have just a whole lot of customers. There's not near so much data in your situation. And within those 100 pages, I'm just going to show you about a half a dozen to make some points about where your rates are now, where they need to go to, and how that'll affect folks. So first of all, I want to tell you that on the water side, your water rates are already closer to where they need to be on a revenue generation basis than what the sewer rates are. Your water rates only need to go up about 20% overall. Not everybody's bill. Some will go up, some go down, some will go up more, but on average, they need to go up 20%. On the wastewater side, the sewer rates need to generate twice as much revenue as what they are right now. So on average, sewer rates need to double. Now that sounds really, really scary, but I'm going to show you here in a minute that it really shouldn't be. because truthfully, your water and especially your sewer rates are just really cheap on an affordability basis. It's one of the things that grant and loan agencies look at when they decide if they're going to give you a grant, or if they're going to give you an interest subsidized loan or relieve some principal or different sorts of things. They make decisions partly based on the affordability index of your rates. That's how much it costs for a residential customer to buy 5,000 gallons per month of water or sewer. Your affordability index right now on water is right at about where it should be. It's 0.46%. In other words, 0.04% of the median household income in Ranchester. On the water side, the current affordability index is 0.21%. So about 1/5 of 1% is what they spend to pay their sewer bill. And it needs to go to 0.42% based on a cost of service structure. So it needs to double. But the national average for affordability index is right at 1%. So your water rates right now are a little less than half of the national average. They need to stay about there. The sewer rates are only 1/5 of the national average. They need to move up to almost 1/2 of the national average. So I wanted to allay some fears that we're going to break the bank with these rate adjustments. You will notice that your bill will be higher. But as compared to what it costs to run, own, and operate the systems, that your bill needs to go up, the revenue needs to go up. And as compared to the national average water and sewer bills, even after adjustment, your rates are still going to be in the vicinity of half of what the national average is. So your rates are still going to be cheap, not as cheap as they are right now, but they're still going to be cheap. Okay, let's scan through real quick. I want to show you on page 13, and by the way, everybody, this report has gone to the council and staff, so they already have this report, and I hope you all have done a bit of reading on it. I'm pretty sure it wasn't your favorite novel to read, but hopefully it's educational for you. The rate of affordability on water, I'm in the first section, it right now is 0.46%. It would go to 0.45%. As I mentioned, 1% is the national average. In this section of the report, basically I give the council instructions on how to go about adjusting the rates. And the important part of that, at least initially, is the table of rates that I recommend. So for water, this table A, remember I recommend that you do assess meter size based system development fees or new connection fees, if you want to call it that. For a 5/8 inch or a 3/4 inch meter, the common sizes for residential customers, that fee should be $2,500, $2,500. For a 4-inch meter at the smallest, lowest capacity to pass flow meter, a 4-inch singlet meter, that fee should be $19,645. Let's just call it $20,000. So in other words, a small meter customer's bill for connecting should be $2,500. A 4-inch meter should be a little less than 10 times that, $20,000 roughly. But to get the exact numbers, they're in the top part of that table. Now, the rates that I recommend, these are the user charge rates. This is what everybody pays every month. For everybody in town, The minimum charge would be $18.73. For the first 10,000 minus 1 gallons, it would be $1.94 per 1,000 gallons. It would go up within these ranges, and at 75,000 and more gallons, it would be $10.67. Out of towners, their rate would be higher by 25%. Their unit charge would also be higher, so you can see what the ranges are like. The bulk water, it's hard to do a cost of service analysis on bulk water without detailed data about what it costs to provide that bulk water. You really can't do a cost of service analysis on that part of your service. So and you all didn't have that kind of data. That's pretty unusual to have that kind of data. So what I simply did was I raised your current bulk water rate by the same percentage, 20.4%, that the average water rate or average water bill needs to go up. So that's that per gallon rate of 0.036 or $36 per 1,000 gallons. If you got a customer that has a 1,000-gallon tank anyway. Those are the rates that I recommend for water. Now I'll scoot quickly to sewer. Sewer rates, same sort of calculation for the system development fee, and not knowing precisely what your system value is, true value is, I use the same dollar amounts as I did for water to recover with system development fees. And I calculate in the same way. So a 5/8 or 3/4 inch meter again would be 2,500. A 4-inch at the singlet style meter would be that $19,000 and change. Now the unit charges would be different. All in-town customers, minimum charge would go to $14.28. You also have a conservation rate structure on the wastewater side. That's pretty rare. Most systems have a level unit charge, but I'm fine with trying to encourage folks to conserve what they put down the drains too. So 0 to 15,000 gallons, that's your same range you have right now. $255. For 60,000 and more, it goes up to $301. It doesn't graduate nearly as quickly as what your water rates do. Now I want to show you just a few other things, and then I'll open up to you all for some questions. I'm scrolling now into the models. Now, the report has a somewhat long narrative part at the beginning just to describe things to you, and then I print out the model so that you can see the math. Now, I mentioned the affordability index before. This is the water affordability index. I also mentioned that the 1% is the national average. That's the dark line, straight line at the top of this screen. The green line is a low volume customer. The affordability is almost always less affordable. It's higher because they use less, but they're still paying the same minimum charge is normally the way it works. The blue line is the 5,000 gallon customer. And the blue line is if you adopt the rates that I've calculated. So you can see it started out at that, it was 0.46%. It will go down ever so slightly to 0.45%. The bill will be ever so slightly more affordable after it's adjusted. And then it's going to stay pretty level because the affordability index is based on household incomes, hopefully, go up over time. At least the Census Bureau is projecting that your incomes will go up over time. And it just so happens your incomes are projected to go up very close to the annual inflationary rate that I expect your costs to go up, and that's 4% for most of your costs. So that line stays pretty level. The red line is your current rates. If you don't raise your current rates, then they become more affordable over time because incomes will go up, but the bill will not. All right, so that's water. Whoops, excuse me. I wanted to show you one more chart in water. Chart 8 is your reserves. Starting off in the test year, 2022, your reserves were at 400,000 and change. In the water system, they kind of waver around a little bit, but after the new rates would kick in, you will build reserves just a bit, up to about $600,000. And then because of timing, we have a capital improvement planned for right in the time when you see those lines drop. So in other words, debt service kicks in from those capital improvements. Some cash is spent for capital improvements. We drop down to about $100,000. And then the line starts to grow again, the recommended rates line. So your reserves will recover and they'll grow pretty strongly up to the target that I had for you. If you do not adjust your rates, you will stay above zero. You'll be in the black. And if you do the capital improvement at the time that we've assumed, then in about 2027, you will drop below zero. You won't be in the black anymore. You'll be in the red. And if you were to try to do that for 10 years, then you would be at about a negative $800,000 or $850,000. In other words, you'd be borrowing from the town to pay ends meet. All right, I want to show you those same two sets of charts on this wastewater side. Again, affordability index, 1%. The blue line is the recommended rates line. Right now, you're at just a smidge over 0.2, 2 basis points, 0.2 percentage point. You would go up to 0.42, and then you would stay fairly level. The red line is your current rates if you would keep them from here on out. And then that reserves line, or the lines for reserves, look like this. Now remember, I mentioned $2 or $3 million in system improvements on the wastewater side. That would happen a little bit later, and that's at this peak in 2028. And then your reserves would start to tail off just a bit down to the target reserve level in 10 years. But a lot of things can happen in 10 years. Who knows if it's really going to tail off like that. If those things did happen, though, the red line, the current rates, would carry you to about 2029, and then you'd drop below zero, and you'd be at about a negative $1.25 million or so. Okay, with that, I'm going to stop talking and see if you all have some questions.
Mr. Mayor, Mr. Brown, I do have a couple questions. First, you spoke several times about comparing our rates to the national average. I wonder if you did a comparison to a regional, something more proximate to where we are, and even more closely than that, Wyoming rates compared to where we are. I don't know that we necessarily meet what is the national average because we are not the nation.
Yeah, and you're right, and I'll tell you an interesting thing before I get all the way to that. I do rates actually coast to coast in the country, and I do a lot of rates in Wyoming, and it amazes me because Wyoming is a pretty darn dry state. I live in the state of Missouri. We got a lot of water in Missouri. Wyoming has some of the cheapest water rates in the country. It's really amazing. You don't have much water, but boy, you sure do sell it cheap. You're also, in most of the systems, you're pretty far away from sustainable. The utilities are not being sustainably funded. So I always try to move my clients to being sustainably funded. Might not get all the way there in one jump, but I try to get them closer every time. So to your question, have I compared to other rates in other places, especially in Wyoming? First of all, comparing your system development fees actually is a reasonable thing to do. Your connection fees, if the town right down the road, and probably Sheridan is, going to be the key one that you want to look at, not because it's comparable in size or something like that, but because if someone wants to build a home, they probably would look in Sheridan, they look in Ranchester, they look at a few other towns in the vicinity, and among other things, they would compare how much it would cost to hook up water and sewer and different kinds of services. It is a good idea to compare your system development, your connection fees to other places. Now, I didn't do that myself. I made the assumption that your current connection fees, because you all live local, you all have set those so they're probably kind of competitive with neighboring places, or you may have even tried to undercut them a little bit. If I remember right, your system connection fee right now it's $1,500, isn't it?
Yeah, yes.
Okay, I was thinking I remembered that. That's just pretty darn cheap. It doesn't pay for hardly any capacity in the system. So I wanted to scoot you up just a little bit. So that's why I chose 2,500. You're not going to be out of whack with anybody that you're competitive with before. System development fees, yes, compared to your neighbors. User charge fees, the fees that pay for operating and paying the debt service and so forth on the system, your costs are your costs. Your costs are not Sheridan's costs or some other place's costs. You need to pay your costs and you need to do it sustainably. If Sheridan or some other place is cheaper, but they're unsustainable, a reality is they'll either stop owning and operating a water system at some point, or they will make their rates sustainable. So it may well be that if your rates after adjustment need to be higher than neighboring communities, then you're just reaching the sustainable rate place before they get to it. I have done 368 rate analyses. There have been a few, I might be able to count them on two hands, where I recommended they lower their rates, but almost nowhere are rates too high. Almost everywhere they're too low. That's true in your case too.
So my second question is on the review of these sewer-based rates. We don't meter our sewer, we only meter the water going in, and it appears your evaluation is scheduled that way. Twofold question, are you taking into account that different from other localities, we have a lagoon system, so the water falls into a lagoon. It is chlorinated because we are near an impaired segment of Tongue River, so we are obligated to treat it with chlorination. Did you take that into account? And then did you also take into account that during the summer months, many users will irrigate their lawn, and that's water that will not go down the drain?
I'm having to work my memory a little bit. The normal well, the normal best practice on sewer rates is for residential customers, you assess the unit charge based on winter average use. Now that works really well in places where people stay there in the winter and they use water, put it back down the toilet and the sink and other water using appurtenances. That makes really good sense in those places. Now you may well have some snowbirds who go away in the winter time, so you wouldn't want to be charging on for sewer on a winter average rate basis. So I'm thinking I recall that you bill for sewer based on water use every month, not on a winter average. But it may be difficult for you to be able to go to a winter average. I'm not real positive on that. It might be that Will or Barbara could clear that up for me. But best practice, winter average use for residentials. For commercial, industrial, anything that's not residential basically, or residential like, then you bill them for sewer based on whatever their water use every month of the year. So that was the part one. And the part two, what was your part two of that question?
Just if in consideration of our sewer rates, you took into account that it's a lagoon system rather than a traditional wastewater treatment plant with many other appurtenances to deal with that.
I was aware that it's a lagoon system, but when it comes to rate setting, it's a dollars, it's a numbers game. So it doesn't matter whether it's a lagoon or it's a certain type of mechanical plant. It doesn't matter whether you need to chlorinate, dechlorinate, do various other things. It doesn't matter on the treatment process. It only matters that it costs X dollars to do all of the stuff that needs to happen to the wastewater before you release it.
I have one final question, and it relates to the graphs that you showed both for the water and the sewer. One with your suggested rate, and then the other if we kept our rates the same for more than 10 years. I appreciate the effort in the graph. I don't think there's a council that would assume they would keep their rates the same for that long of time. I wonder if in your calculations you put any effort into figuring out what the minimum rate would be to stay in the black. That way we would bracket, where we should be. I just don't know that it's great that the no rate increase is on the graph, but I don't know that it's all that relevant.
Yeah, it is a pie in the sky sort of thing to believe that most systems would hold their current rates for 10 years. Although I do pick up a lot of clients who haven't adjusted their rates for 10 plus years. Got one about 2 weeks ago. I think it's been 22 years since they've adjusted their, I believe that one was water rates. So there are some that are still going a long time, but no, the reality is inflation happens. And if you set your revenue stream so that it's paying your current cost plus building toward proper reserves and all those sorts of things, as inflation happens, then logically you need to raise your rates to at least match inflation. And I've built that assumption into the rates that I've calculated. So that's a thing that you all need to do in the future too, raise rates across the board by whatever the budget needs to go up. I assume 4%, but if it's 3, raise it 3. So yeah, comparing to what if we don't do anything, what is the difference? The main point that I want to get across with that kind of a graph, though, is the total difference between the blue line and the red line in the 10th year is somewhere between about 1.25 negative and a positive about 700,000. So it's about $2.5 million that you leave on the table, if you could say it that way, by keeping the rates the same. So yes, it would be a better comparison to compare with what the town might think they'll actually do with their rates. You know, if it weren't for me coming around, and maybe they would figure, well, we'll match inflation. And then 10 years out, the only difference would be what they would have picked up just matching inflation versus what they'd have picked up if they did that. Plus, they did all the capital improvements and they built the property reserves and all that sort of stuff that I'd come along and recommend. But arriving at that rate of increase that they would do, were it not for me recommending something, for me, that's kind of pie in the sky, because some places raise rates a lot and then they take a vacation for 5 years.
Mr. Mayor, I have no further questions, but I do have a comment just for the benefit of the folks that are here that would be somewhat constructive. At least as far as a town, we have an obligation, a statutory obligation in our water and sewer system to treat them what's called an enterprise account, meaning the operation and maintenance of that system has to be in the black. We have to keep it that way. What we do as a state, we're called what's a direct distribution state. So in the case of large capital projects, there's generally not enough revenue generated from fees on water and sewer to put in a large segment of brand new water line or brand new sewer line. So in the case of a development, it's the developer's responsibility to put in the capital expense of that system. And then our rate fees, once the system is in, keeps us in the black for the operation and maintenance of it. But I just want to share that with everyone. And part of the reason for this rate study is to ensure that our operation and maintenance remains in the black, so that when you turn the faucet on, you have water, and when you flush, it goes somewhere. But on the other end, and that's why there's several grant programs and loan programs throughout the state to afford towns our size that don't have the revenues to take on a large capital project that might be to the tune of $5 to $10 million, depending on what that is. We rely on the state, and we rely on a good rate structure. So when the State Land and Investment Board looks at us and says, are you taking care of your system? If we can answer yes, and we're well into the black, like this rate study suggests, then we are a good lending partner, somebody that they can give money to keep our system going. And we could afford either a large fix if we need to, or better yet, we're looking at, and we have been, and I've got to congratulate our staff throughout the years, they have looked to upgrade and replace large capital segments of our system. We used to have what was called vitrified clay pipe under the ground. It had been there for 20, 50 years. It was failing. We've gone through and repaired that, and that's part and parcel to this good rates, but also using direct distribution dollars and keeping our town out of debt.
And actually, I'll tag on to that comment just a little bit. Yes, rates, water and sewer rates in Wyoming are just generally cheaper than almost everywhere else. But Wyoming, for a long time, has been very fortunate to have a revenue stream that it can share with the local governments so that you all can take care of infrastructure. The cost of building new capacity, you know, replacing plants and lines and all that sort of thing, that is huge in water and sewer. And those shared revenues really help you out in Wyoming. So that does help you to keep your rates lower.
Okay, sorry, novice to this topic, but capital investment, it doesn't seem to me that it's something that's required. It's not every year, necessarily 5 years, every 10. So building up that reserve, I understand increasing 20% and doubling water and sewer respectively to get to that point, but I don't know, it seems an argument against adding more homes and high-rise low income and so forth that might endanger not being able to get parent rich public money
Well,
to
we're gonna,
do capital improvement.
we're working on a capital improvement right now that we're trying to replace our water, failing water line from the tanks to the town. So that's where that reserve comes in. It doesn't necessarily need expansion, but it just keeping on top of what we have here. For example, if the DEQ or somebody came in and said that our water treatment plant is no longer complied with regulations, we would have to replace that, even without increasing capacity, we just have to replace it.
What if this town grew, if it doubled? I mean, there's a lot of building going on. Just,
Well,
let's
we
just
can't,
say,
well, this goes back, I want to draw this to a close, but this goes back to the fact that we can't add subdivisions or anything without the approval of DEP. We have to show them that we have the capacity to be able to do that and handle it. We just can't do that. So, I mean, even if we have, say we have 500 acres that are annexed in, we can't do it until you can prove that you can actually handle that capacity.
Right.
So, but there's, like I said, right now, we're looking at a $5 million capital improvement replacing water lines in town that are gonna fail.
really,
Mhm.
and we don't have the money,
Not that kind of money.
and where might we get it?
We got a SLID loan, a grant from SLID, and we're working with the State Water Development Commission to get the other half. But that's why you have to have those reserves there, because,
Right.
yeah, that's
Understood.
where you have to go with it. So, just, anyway, I think we've had, plenty of information on this. Thank you, Carl. Really appreciate your work. It was very instructive. Anything else?
I have no further comments.
Okay.
Then we'll have
I'll tell you what, I'll close with this then. As you all do review the report just a bit more, I want to encourage you to take action on rates pretty soon, especially on the sewer rates, because they're way too low. But as you're going through that review, if you have other questions, if you're wondering, well, what happens if we do this, that, or the other, then go ahead and filter those back to me through either Will or Barbara. And I ask for that so that if two of you have kind of the same question, she or he can put those together for me. But I'll go into the modeling and then I'll find the answers for you, because I want to get you all the way to the rate setting goal line. Just because I finished the main modeling and then I go away doesn't mean I'm actually gone. I'm still around. So give me your questions if you have any later on.
Okay, thanks, Carl. I know it's been a challenge.
You're welcome.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Well, I'm going to go ahead and sign off and save you all some of my time. How about that?
Thank you.
Thank you.
It's just a kind of, as far as the rate, we don't know, we needed some place to start. We've just been guessing at what we were doing for the most part, trying to make sure we could cover what we needed to cover and not get too expensive and stuff. So we needed some kind of base rate to figure out where we're going, because we had no.
So his recommendation is to increase water 20% and double the sewer. Is that a recommendation you'll follow?
We'll look at more. I don't know. We need to figure out how to keep us from, we can't use general funds to backdoor to support our water and sewer. It's against the law for us. It's state statute. So, we have to do one, or we have to do something. Otherwise especially on the sewer side, we've been looking at that for some time, trying to figure out when we do the budget. Thank you much. Moving on to mayor's report. I interviewed 4 candidates for the vacancy on the planning commission, and I'd like to recommend Amber Kuchka to do that. So I need your approval to appoint her.
Mr. Mayor, I move to accept your appointment.
Moving second, Stephanie Christie, appointment and Kuchka to the planning commission. All in favor?
Aye.
My term on the Summer Valley Joint Powers Board has expired. So if somebody else wants this job, I don't have anybody follow through for that one. So we need to reappoint me back on the board. No, they're not, well, I'm ready for it.
I would move to appoint the mayor.
It's a 3-year,
For a 3-year term. If willing.
Okay. Willingly accepted. Okay. I just want to share, I have an update from the community covered for the last year for the assistance to the community, so if they're interested in that. Will, the report for Will? Anything to say?
Yeah, a couple of quick things. Meeting Mayor and Council, a couple of things, a lot of this stayed the same on here from our last meeting. There is, one thing that's different on the level 3 funding. We are on the omnibus water bill. We're trying to give it a new date, so we'll see what that happens, and that's going back to replacing our ductile iron pipe and putting in a distribution main and stuff like that. So that's supposed to, I think, it starts February 14th or February 11th. Well, 11th on here too. So we'll see what happens there if that gets voted and approved. And we're gonna be going back to the slid board and probably hopefully adjusting our scope of work a little bit and get a big project going and see if we can get that knocked out. So other than that, that's probably the one major thing on there for sure that I wanted to touch on, to see if you have any questions about that. We're still kind of a waiting game as of right now. Hopefully those good stuff.
I appreciate you looking at that. I don't think it's been a work in progress for the whole town on that upgrade, so I appreciate that.
Yeah, hopefully it'll work, not in the hospital. I'm sure how that works. And they told us that once this kind of in there, it doesn't, they don't really jerk it out of that. Just keep your fingers crossed. Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Will. We're going to meet before. Parks and Rec.
Evening, council and mayor. And go through some of my projects and parks and stuff that are going on right now. Town park, back here behind town hall, we had some basketball hoops we pulled out of the park, out of the parking area we have now. We needed more parking for our event that we have going on here. There are plans to replace those basketball areas and some other additions that we'll get to down the road. Looking for bids on the fall material we have back here in our playground. I want to try to get it ADA compliant. This is a center stopping point off the interstate. With wheelchairs and strollers and stuff, which is work very good. So looking at some of the materials for that. Our baseball field, we're kind of discussing kicking it around using it as a multi-use area, multi-sport, maybe moving our basketball courts down there, pickleball courts, dog park, try to get more use out of it, pretty it up, go down the road with it. Rotary Pond, earlier this fall, we replaced the primary and secondary drains. They've been upgraded. They were failing. So those have been replaced. We're going to replace some of the damaged sidewalk panels. We had some panels we had to tear out for the drain replacement also. So those would be in there. We had some other ones that were failing and cracked that we'll be replacing this summer and spring. Wander Park, we got the upgraded playground installed this last fall, right before winter. It looks great. We still got some landscaping to finish up this spring. And then I'm working on bids for sprinkler systems and it just anything grass and stuff along there. Mobile Park, looking at bids for a sprinkler system there too. So, Alley Park, our plans are still to remove the outdated equipment that's not safe, doesn't have the fall materials, but the basketball court will stay there. It's in good shape and gets used too. The Eagles Nest Community Garden, the community center took this over from the school district after the school district moved into the school. They're having trouble with volunteers to come in and help with the program, with the garden, with the kids and stuff like that. So we're kind of going back and forth on future plans with it, if it's going to remain there, or if the town's going to need it for expansion and buildings and stuff like that.
Signage for all the parks are being looked at. They'll have the park name, some rules incorporated or text my gov, code on it to where they can give us feedback on our parks. If there's something they see that needs updated or complaint or something like that, they can let us know. Working on some grants, looking into some tree grants to the U.S. Forest Service, Forestry Division. They're kind of a urban community forest grants. This is all going to kind of fall into play if we become a Tree USA incorporated. With that, there's some more information I gotta get on that, but if we can become a Tree USA town, we can apply for these grants a lot easier, and there's a lot of funding out there for them. That's all I have.
Thank you, Bob. Good job for the first time out of the chief. Thank you.
Mayor, council. I'll keep this brief. For everyone's benefit here, it's been a long one. Just a few things to hit on as far as calls that are a little bit out of the norm. I assisted the Division of Criminal Investigation with a homicide investigation. And I assisted the Sheridan Police Department with an investigation as well. Those were both canine related requests. So we've been active in that. Other than that, pretty normal business as usual. Speeders in town have been doing a lot of work in the school zones and around the schools, the time that kids are traveling to and from schools. We've seen I've seen a pretty good decline in traffic violations from the past several months, but in this last, since the last meeting, I have seen a 46 and a 30 and a 31 and a 20-mile-an-hour school zone. So it still does happen. Being pretty vigilant about that. One other thing, a little bit out of the norm, was we've had a lot of litter that's been placed in the recycle dumpster, and staff has had to really sort through what's recyclable before they haul it off to Sheridan. Some of that litter included name and address, so I was able to contact the people, and hopefully they can correct that issue. It is a pretty steep fine to be fined for that, but it's also a steep charge to the town if that trailer load ends up having to go across the dump scale and get, we get invoiced for that trash. Other than that, with the warm weather, we've seen an influx of dogs at large. A lot of dogs, especially after the real cold snap we had, people were happy to be able to kick their dogs back out of the house, and some of them were running at large. So my Marshall message to everyone is just make sure that your dogs are contained and they're not running at large. It means they need to be under your control, on a leash, on a cord. And along with that too, just be mindful of your dogs being out and barking. Any questions for me?
Thank you, Marshall.
Thank you.
Hey, Mayor. So we skipped the planning commission update. This was be before our engineer. For our planning commission, we have 3 members here, so we do have an update from the planning commission.
Okay, thank you.
Not here for a couple of times.
Sure that you were.
Especially on school night.
Sorry.
You're okay. Well, it kind of helped that Bob went before, our presentation. So Bob had mentioned that, the town is looking at including some signage in the parks. And the planning commission decided that, through our community survey, walking paths and signage to increase, getting people out in the community is going to be, the focus that the community told us that they wanted us to focus on. So to piggyback on that, we would recommend that the town allocate up to $10,000 in their next budget cycle to start incorporating some signage and branch out maybe away from just the parks, but maybe along railway. We know there's some access and easement issues with the railroad, but on that signage, maybe we could include
information from our centennial book that talks about some of the buildings and use that the town used to have. And then not just with the text my gov QR code, but maybe other QR codes that would suggest maybe different walking routes through town that show people options. So on your paper, there are just a couple maps I kind of stole from Summer Valley Community Center's 5Ks in Ranchester, some of their options. So that has been our focus for quite a while, several months. But I think now we're going to be focusing on much larger things that are coming our way. So,
Well, thank you.
any questions about that?
No, I appreciate the effort.
Nice, nice work. Thanks.
Yeah.
Thanks.
If down, can I get a copy?
Can I turn the page over now? So special committees. As of right now, the next joint powers, well, the next joint powers board is going to be back to 13th of February, so next Tuesday, we move it up to conference. For John, this one, the next joint powers board. At 4 o'clock here. Manchester. Anything from the fire department?
I mean, we are still seeking a few grants to replace the structure truck, and we responded to a call during the middle of this meeting. I could be in 2 places at once.
So, yeah, I know I was at the county commissioners meeting and they did approve the letter for the support for the MRG. So. Treasurer's board.
Right. I did make a few transfers. See that on here. That's just our normal transfers that we need to move around.
I would move to approve the treasury report as presented.
Mike Jefferson, Tracy, the treasurer's report as presented. Any comments? Any comments? All in favor?
Aye.
Carries. Approve bills. Long list is credit cards, certificates.
And we also did add the fire department had an educational expense for Shannon Miller to take a grant writing class, and that is included in the bills. She's already taken the class, so.
Yes.
Yeah.
There's on garbage. What's that again? I agree, 100%, yeah.
When we see our new garbage truck, that will be cool.
I move to approve bills in the amount of $141,315.63.
Tracy, you by Jefferson, Tracy to approve the bills. Any more comments? All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Carries. Payroll.
I move to approve payroll. We pay $37,924.39.
Moved by Jefferson, by Tracy to approve payroll. Any more discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Carries. Future agenda items? Get a motion to-
I move to adjourn.
Incredibly.